Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse. You are on the Bible Forum. It's October 8th, 2017. I want to talk to you about money. Well, specifically, I want to talk to you about international money. Christine Lagarde is the chairwoman of the International Monetary Fund. She gave a speech recently. She was talking about virtual currencies. Now, some of you know nothing about virtual currencies. I know nothing. But I know the term Bitcoin. It's a virtual currency. And these virtual currencies provide their own unit of value and payment systems. They are called peer-to-peer systems, operating outside the central clearing houses or the central banks. The virtual currencies of today are volatile, Christine said, risky. They are energy intensive. They end up being a threat to existing systems. Plus, she said, the underlying technologies are not yet able to be matched against existing standards such as interest or rates of return, and too opaque, too hard to comprehend for regulators. Besides, she said, some have already been hacked, making them appear too unsafe. But she wasn't throwing it out. She wasn't discounting this sort of thing, this peer-to-peer stuff, because she said much of this can be overcome in time. She pointed out that it wasn't that long ago that experts argued that personal computers would never be adopted and tablets would only be used as coffee trays. And not so long ago, some experts argued that personal computers would never be popular, certainly not as popular as they are today. So she says, I think it may be wise to dismiss the virtual currencies. May not be wise, sorry. So the question becomes, do we need better value for our money? And her theory or thesis was yes. And she gave illustrations. Think of countries with weak institutions, unstable national currencies. Instead of adopting the currency of another country, such as the United States dollar, some of these economies might see a growing use of virtual currencies. She suggested calling this dollarization 2.0. Now, why might citizens hold virtual currencies rather than physical dollars, euros, or the pound sterling? Well, she said because it may one day be easier and safer than obtaining paper bills, especially in remote regions, and because virtual currencies could actually become more stable. For instance, they could be issued one for one for dollars, or a stable basket of currencies. Issuance could be fully transparent, governed by a credible and predefined rule, an algorithm that can be monitored, or even a smart rule that might reflect changing macroeconomic circumstances. Now, we all know what that means. No, we don't. But they do. So in many ways, virtual currencies might just give existing currencies and monetary policy a run for their money. In the light of that, she offered this advice. She said the best response by central bankers is to continue running effective monetary policy while being open to fresh ideas and new demands as the economies evolve. Will we transition to a purely electronic monetary system? She thinks it's entirely possible. But it doesn't necessarily mean virtual money will be the wild, wild west of economic policy. It will mean getting hard currency out of our pockets. Money in our pockets is fast becoming not only unnecessary, but unsafe. And the reality is that there are very few businesses that need hard currency. They don't need your money. And those that do are quickly becoming rare as hen's teeth. You know about credit cards? Europe is an illustration where electronic monetary systems would solve a number of important issues, according to her. Small purchases across borders is apparently very expensive, not to mention the rates of exchange, and the whole thing just gets confusing. So what is the logical solution? Well, it would be an international monetary fund, an international monetary system, an international means by which people could move money around no matter what country they are in, and to do that without having to reach in their pocket and come up with the currency of that particular nation. Enter electronic transfers. We do that with our credit cards now. And you have recently received a new credit card that has a little chip in a little square chip in it. They're doing away with the other stuff. Why? Well, as one merchant said to me several years ago, it was explained to him that the new card with the chip transfers the responsibility of a bad transaction to the merchant, not the credit card company. So it's in the credit card's interest to come up with these cards. Now, when you go to the stores and you use these, if you ask or they have literature on it, what they're telling us is, and you know when you put that in, it has to sit there for a second or two. You can't just put it in and you can't swipe it. Well, you can, it has a strip, but I mean, if you're using the chip, it has to sit there. Why? Because it's reading all the information. It's creating a transaction right there, right now, on that machine. And once that transaction is legitimate, it's done, it transfers to the cash register and you can take it out. What happens if that card's no good? Used to go back on the credit card company, and according to this merchant, it doesn't do that anymore. I don't know. But I know that it's fast getting to the place where we don't need the card at all. I mean, that little chip is in your card because we're used to cards, and the card is a convenient vehicle for that little chip, but it could be tattooed into your finger. It would be the same thing, wouldn't it? We talked about that. We talked about how they now have these doodads. It's all a picture of them. I put it on the website. That is put right into a tattoo. It's part of your body, and it scans just like that little chip. Can you say 666? We don't know when any of that's going to happen. I mean, that's a time, and if you're looking through the book of Revelation, you're trying to get a scenario sequence, that's at least halfway through the Great Tribulation. And the Great Tribulation doesn't begin until the church leaves. And it does not necessarily begin immediately upon the church's leaving. I mean, the idea of a church being pulled out means that this could have happened in the 1st century AD. It can happen today. But it doesn't necessarily mean the events described in the book of the Revelation relative to the Great Tribulation have to begin immediately. Although, as you read through it, it does look like that. There are no Christians mentioned in the book of Revelation after chapter 4 or 5. They're not there. Where'd they go? And everything that's taking place seems to be very human. International governments and the economy and the money and all of the wars and all the things that are happening in the world, primarily in the Middle East, but the nations are mentioned and all these things are happening. There's no church anywhere. If anything, it revolves around Israel. The Bible says that God will hide Israel away for 3.5 years. It's believed that they're going to be over in Petra, but who knows? God will secure them while he does all this other stuff. And this other stuff are the nations of the world destroying themselves, coming at each other and going nuts until finally Jesus comes. And when he comes, he stops the war. He kills off every unbeliever on the planet. They die. Nobody left but those who are believers. 1/3 of Israel will survive. That means 2/3 of the Jews in the world today are going to die during this time period. They're not believers. They're Jews by birth. They're Jews by, whatever method. But they really don't believe the Bible and the God of the Bible and so forth. It's more of a family, or it's sort of like the way Christians go to church. Well, that's my church. I had a woman this past week that I picked up, and I took her back to the dealership, and as we did, we went by a church. Now, I'd taken a shortcut, was a long cut. I had gone a fancy way to get around the traffic on the interstate and the traffic on the main thoroughfares. It was 6 o'clock at night coming out of Charleston. It's New York's got nothing on these people. But I have found a shortcut. I found another way to get off the main track, and we're going through this neighborhood, and there's my church. Well, she had already told me where she lived, and where she lived is probably 45 minutes away from this location. Well, I haven't been for a long time, but that's where I have my membership. Maybe I still have it there. I don't know. That's her church. They have her name. She's a member of that church. No, she's not. No, she's not. And there are a lot of Jews that their religion is like that. They're secular Jews. They don't go to church. The whole point here is only 1/3 of the Jews alive at the time of the Great Tribulation are going to survive it. And no Gentile will survive that isn't a believer. This whole thing about the money and controlling the money is seemingly the pivot point in the Great Tribulation scenario. And here's another link, another methodology, another way. I'm old enough to remember a time when most people could not imagine how the world would do anything like this that's mentioned in the Bible. And now everybody in the world is saying not only can they see it, but here's the head of the International Monetary Fund saying it's preferable. Keep your eye on the eastern sky. Your redemption draweth nigh.